Hey everyone, this is Rahul with the Alternative Investors Hangout, and today we have a returning guest. He is Charles Goyette. He's the author of a few books. The latest book is Red, Blue, and Broke All Over, and also he's the author of a great book, The Dollar Meltdown. Thanks for coming on again, Charles.
Rahul, great to speak with you again.
Okay, last week I saw something absurd in the news, and I also read about it regarding the debt ceiling hike in 2011 as well, and on some left-wing blogs, they're talking about this coin which the Treasury can come up with, and they could have any denomination, and they're talking about having $1 trillion denomination of this coin. And basically they could place this coin at the Federal Reserve, and they could draw out $1 trillion and pay out $1 trillion to the Treasury, so we wouldn't have to raise our debt ceiling. I mean, what would be the consequence if they even thought about doing this? I don't think they would do this, but this sounds like Robert Mugabe and the $100 trillion bill that they came up with there.
It sure does. I think they might as well go ahead and do it. It's I mean, look, the monetary system that we have right now is a fraud. The paper money is a fraud. It's often not even paper money. It's just, a few electrons dancing around digitally. And it's all created out of thin air. It's nothing but a fraud. So the deal with this is the Treasury is empowered by law to mint a commemorative platinum coin and put a dollar value on it, like they used to put. And I'm not even sure they do, but used to put a $50 face value or something on gold coins, like Canadian maple leafs. I think used to be $50 in denomination and so on. So the idea was that, we'll just have the Treasury. You don't have to go through the Federal Reserve. We'll just have the Treasury issue a platinum coin that's $1 trillion. And, look, I think they ought to just do it. It'll hasten the end of this fraudulent, this bogus monetary system anyway. I mean, just because a group of madmen in Washington, wave a magic wand and say something is money, doesn't mean that it is. How would you like? Let me just ask you, or I'll be a proxy for you, or maybe both of us. How would we like to, say, buy a couple of $100,000 of U.S. Treasury bonds, knowing that when it's time to redeem our bonds and get our $100,000 back, they might just, issue a new platinum coin worth $1,500 and say, here, it's a $100,000 coin. It's just this is all madness. It takes madmen to think these things up. It shows how completely disconnected we are from reality in our monetary system in this country for people to seriously advance these ideas. But, it's taken, I agree, Rahul, every time I look around, and it's not just on, on liberal blogs and stuff, but it's by people that are confused about the nature of money to begin with. I see this idea floating around, and it just makes me laugh.
Yeah, it does make me laugh as well. And these are the same guys, and I wanted your take on the 1970s compared to what's going on right now. These guys are saying, the MMT guys and the Keynesians are saying that we could print into oblivion, but we did see an increase in the monetary supply, or the money supply, in the 1970s, and we saw this inflation. And some of these guys stated that we had this inflation because of oil shocks. Sure, it could have been because of that, because of the tension in the Middle East, but wasn't it due to all this money printing by Arthur Burns? And eventually we're going to see the same thing happen with what Ben Bernanke has done. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, yeah, there's no question. I mean, and in fact, it's just the other way around. It wasn't the oil shocks that caused the inflation. The inflation was an explicit policy to absorb higher oil prices. But, the OPEC nations, the Saudis and the OPEC nations were very clear with us. They said, if you keep depreciating your dollar, if this doesn't stop, if you don't get a handle on this, it's going to be reflected in higher oil prices. I mean, after all, we may be Americans. It may be a wonderful thing, and it's just great to be able to, thump our chest. But what kind of people, go to somebody with an appreciating commodity, a commodity that is dearly in demand everywhere in the world, universally in demand, and go to them and say, we want to be able to buy your universally desired commodity that you extract from the earth at a great deal of cost and effort and expense and expertise, and we want to be able to buy it with our rapidly depreciating currency that we create at the cost of paper and ink. And so, we thought that they were going to go along with it. Well, of course they weren't. So it was just the opposite. And, people that were around at the time, know very explicitly that guys like Kissinger, were totally behind the idea of dollar destruction to offset higher oil prices.
And this comes to today now. Let's fast forward to today. We did know back in the day we had all this money printing. We have all this money printing now, and the guys like Schiff are being hammered by the guys on the hard left saying that, hey, where's the nasty inflation? Where's the hyperinflation? So why haven't we experienced that same type of inflation that you saw in the 1970s and many others experienced?
Mm-hmm. Well, we always knew that the Fed was capable of creating money, creating bank reserves, monetizing debt. But, nobody that's not a policymaker can tell you that, at what point that's going to enter the general economy. I mean, we're right now on the razor's edge, where on the one hand, people widely hope that the economy gets better and that employment improves and that, business ramps up and so on and so forth. But to the extent that happens, it'll depend on banks making loans, and banks making loans mean that this money that has been sitting there idle now since its creation, at $2 trillion that the Fed has created out of thin air, that has been sitting there just effectively inert without doing much real damage to the economy, somehow at that time starts getting kicked into the system, drip, 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 drip. It works its way into the patient's body, and and it has an impact. So look, everybody understands that this is going to happen. Even Paul Krugman, in the world of inflationists, even Paul Krugman came out with a column last week in which he said, well, inflation can be a problem sometime under these conditions. Well, we all knew that. He's not saying anything that, Austrians knew that. Look, if there's not an Austrian economist in the world that would say, if the Fed prints $1 trillion in cash, in paper money, $1 trillion, and shrink wraps it and leaves it in the basement of the Federal Reserve, that it will have an impact on the general price level. Nobody has ever believed such a thing. In my life, I have never heard anybody pronounce such an idea. Certainly no rational Austrian school economist has said that a shrink wrap pile of $100 bills in the basement of the Fed is going to cause increased prices throughout the economy. We've always known that that in a fractional reserve banking system, it takes bank lending to really put the pedal to the metal on price inflation.
All right, I wanted to change subjects and go into what Obama is doing right now. Or he wants to implement all this gun control, but we know that all these gun shooters have been exposed to all these drugs pushed on by Big Pharma. But don't you think that it's kind of contradictory when the government wants to take all of people's guns, or want to try to slowly but steadily take people's guns, but at the same time the U.S. government is buying all these rounds of ammunition? Isn't that kind of worrisome on your part?
I should say so. It's extremely worrisome. They keep coming out. I saw a piece today in which some Washington bureaucrats try to say, no, honestly, we're just buying all this stuff. It's for training. It's for target shooting. And I'm thinking they're buying hollow points, designed to do maximum damage to the human body at a premium price. Well, it is government. They can be wasteful, but nobody in their right mind buys hollow points for target shooting. They don't buy the expensive stuff if they're going to go out and point paper targets. So yes, it's very worrisome. I mean, it's like, but almost half the men in America own guns. So they're not going to be successful. There's something a little different in the culture of America. We didn't come into this world 200 years ago as serfs of a feudal lord who tells us what to do. We're Americans, and we're free people. And yes, a lot of that independence has been watered down by government programs, government education, and the massive growth of centralized power in Washington. But when push comes to shove, it's just not going to happen. But I agree with you. I mean, if anybody wanted to do anything, look, all of this stuff is damage done by the government in the first place. I mean, they subsidize. There are more people doing more harm and dying from legal medical drugs than are dying from all the street drugs in America. And it's government that is pushing and subsidizing and driving people to the widespread and promiscuous use of these psychotropic, these mood-altering drugs, the SSRIs, and they're complicit in almost all of these mass shooters. So you ask yourself, I mean, Washington's perfectly incapable of functioning coherently about anything, but I think a 5-year-old could figure this out. If half the men in America own guns and don't shoot up schools, but people that are on SSRIs commit these wanton acts of violence at an enormous rate, then maybe we ought to look at the SSRIs?
Yeah, they never seem to look at the SSRIs. And then on top of it, these limousine liberals like Dianne Feinstein and Michael Moore, they have their own entourage with guns protecting them, and Piers Morgan as well. And they want to go after Americans' guns, but they don't want them to go after their own guns or their own bodyguards. So,
well, of course, it's the same old hypocrisy. Didn't that newspaper that published the list of people that are that are registered gun owners in their community? When they got one nasty little email from somebody that wasn't happy about them, what did they do? They ran out and hired an armed thug to protect them. So, look, the use of power goes hand in hand with hypocrisy, and to the extent people can't see through it, then everything's bound to spiral down into complete dissolution, and the center does not hold. But I think most people of goodwill can given a chance, can sniff out a little bit of this kind of hypocrisy.
Totally agree. And before I let you go, Charles, how can people do business with you? I understand that you have a newsletter.
Yeah, I have a couple of very, very valuable newsletters. In fact, I'm just finishing up the January edition. Tonight I'm finishing up the January edition. It's a very important one of the Freedom and Prosperity Letter. You can just do a web search for Freedom and Prosperity Letter. It'll take you to my publisher, Weiss Research. Weiss Research has been publishing real and honest news about the economy and the state of the banks in this country, insolvency of the government, and sound investment advice for a very, very long time. And they publish my newsletter, the Freedom and Prosperity Letter. That's all you have to do is Google Freedom and Prosperity Letter, and it'll take you right there to the Weiss Research site where you can subscribe.
All right. Thanks for coming on again, Charles.
Rahul, good to speak with you.